Hello everyone and welcome back to Sketch by Sketch. Today I'm going to be taking you through the process of how I create a digital drawing on Procreate. Today I'm going to be drawing in a semi-realistic style and we're going to be drawing Loki and Sylvie from the new Loki TV show. So let's get right into it. Alright, so for the sketching process, I'm not going to explain this very much just because everyone has a different style of sketching and how they create their characters. So what I like to do when I start a drawing though is I choose the size that I want to draw my drawing in. I usually choose an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And then I go ahead and insert a reference photo. Now I do not trace the reference photo, I just go ahead and insert it so I can see it, and I usually just pop it up on the side. This time I did choose to use some art as a reference instead of a still photograph of real life. I just found this art drawing and thought it would be super fun to draw them. This process is sped up right here just because I was not planning on recording this and making a tutorial out of it, but it ended up turning out great in the end, and I just thought it would be a good example of how I create these drawings. So pretty much I sketch my characters on one layer and then I add a layer on top of that. And I use a technical pencil and I go in with a fine size and I just go ahead and cleanly outline my sketch on that top layer, and then you can go ahead and hide the sketch layer and you'll be left with your perfect line art. I did go ahead and add a little bit of a background here with one of the brushes already preloaded on Procreate. Almost all the brushes I use are already default brushes. I try not to use anything downloaded just because it's a little bit easier for me and it's easier for you guys to just jump right in and use what I'm using. So pretty much to start out the coloring process, as you can see I already colored Loki's face. I forgot to start recording, but I pretty much use the technical pencil for all of my coloring. It's just a brush that's preloaded on Procreate. I use it for the sketching, the line art, and of course, like I said, the coloring. You're just going to create a bunch of layers underneath the line art layer because you want to not color over top of the line art. And you're going to, as you can see, just select a new layer for every part of the drawing. So Loki's skin is going to be on one layer, Sylvie's skin is going to be on another, their hair will be on another. Pretty much everything is just continuing to put a layer underneath of each other. And of course, if you know Procreate, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Just make sure that you don't put separate elements on the same layer, because then you're going to be overlapping colors, and it just keeps it so much cleaner if you can use these different layers. Hopefully that makes some sense to you guys. I'm not the greatest at explaining all this technical stuff, but hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. And of course, if you've used digital drawings, you know about the layers, but just make sure that you are doing that. Also, another quick tip, if you outline the shape of something like the hair like you just saw me do, you can drag from the corner the color and it'll fill in your outline. So as you can see, I'm just outlining this hair here, and then I'll be able to fill it in. You got to make sure you completely close off the outline. If there's any small, even just a little tiny bit of white in between, then this technique will not work. But as you can see, I'm just filling in that there. So that's a quick tip. It kind of helps everything go a little bit quicker. So what I like to do first is just get these flat colors in. I'm not shading anything yet. Sometimes I will stop and just do like face and hair and then finish the rest later, but for the most part I like to get my flat colors in first. So as you can see, I selected a new layer below Loki's hair, and I'm going to put Sylvie's hair in. This is pretty much what you're going to do for every element of the drawing. This is a time-consuming process, but it is very necessary for completing the rest of the drawing. Another tip for fun illustrations, you can play around with the line art color. You can change it. If you put alpha lock on the layer that the line art is on, that prevents you from drawing outside of the lines that are already put on the paper. So you could completely change the line art color without really changing anything else. You won't be able to draw outside the lines of the line art that you already put. So hopefully, again, that makes sense. But so you can play around with the line art colors. I recommend using a dark navy blue, dark brown, or a gray color. Sometimes I use black or purple. It just depends. This time I went with a purpley color but of course you can just choose what fits your drawing. If you're wondering what I'm doing here, I've selected a section of Sylvie's face with the lasso tool. This is on the line art layer, and I'm just kind of messing with it a little bit, kind of adjusting, as you can see, just to make it look a little bit more like her. I like to do this usually before I start coloring, but as I was putting those flat colors down, I was realizing that it needed fixed a little bit, and just because I hadn't put any shadows in yet, I could totally do this. So if you're kind of just working on your drawing and you notice that something doesn't look quite right on your line art, you can go ahead and use that lasso tool, and you can select the area that you want to move or warp or distort, and then you can just play around with that and get it looking how you want it to. As you can see, I'm just messing around with this, getting it where I want it, and I'm just going to continue to play with that until it's how I like it. And you can do this to really help you when you're trying to create likeness in a character. I tried to do a more realistic style this time when I was drawing the two, Loki and Sylvie. I wanted it to look like them, and I think with me messing around with this a little bit, I got it looking pretty close, at least for a semi-realistic style, and that's what I was going for. So definitely take advantage of that tool so you can make your drawings look a little more realistic. And again, I selected a new layer. I like to just start with a top layer, and then everything just continues to be put underneath of it, just so you're not coloring on top, because let's just say I colored the skin on the top layer, and then I wanted to color his shirt. I would put it underneath so that I can't draw on top of the skin that I already colored. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining this, but it's just the only way I know how to, and it kind of makes sense to me, so hopefully it's making sense to you. But just remember, keep putting new layers for everything, and it'll really help you out when it comes to the shading process. And as I mentioned before, if you don't fill in the color completely, it'll color your entire page. You just saw the brown completely fill the page. That was because I was doing my outline so I could fill in the color, and I just didn't close it off completely. So just make sure you do that if you're going to use the color fill feature. If you're wondering exactly how I created this background, it was super simple, but I could do a quick tutorial on that at another time. So if you like that and want to see that, let me know down in the comments. I always recommend going back in and just kind of before you do the shading, doing all this moving around like I'm doing with my line art. I already talked about this, I know, but definitely make sure that your line art is exactly how you want it before you start shading, because once you add those shadows and then the features aren't lining up with that, it's not going to look right. So you got to make sure you're happy with your line art before you start shading. I've been drawing Loki a lot lately just because I really liked the show, and I've been watching a lot of Marvel movies, so overall I've just been drawing a lot of Marvel characters. But I think this one actually is probably my favorite because it looks like Tom Hiddleston a little bit, and I've been really trying to capture the likeness. I've been really trying to work on not just that character, but all of my characters looking a little bit more realistic and having the features of the actual person. So I definitely am very happy with the way that this turned out, and I think just by a glance you can definitely tell who it is, and so I'm very happy about that. Definitely something I've been working on lately. While I'm finishing coloring this up, I did want to mention that I'm working on some Marvel tutorials. Like I said, I've been really into the movies. They're really fun to watch. I've just had a great time watching them, and the characters are extremely fun to draw. I've been wanting to get into drawing some more fan art, and I thought drawing Marvel characters is the best way to do it. So I am working on a little mini series of doing tutorials. I have picked out the characters that I am going to draw, but I would love to know who you want to see first, so maybe down in the comments I can put the list of characters that I will be doing tutorials for, and you guys can let me know who you want to see first, and I can start recording those. I did go ahead and record Bucky, a tutorial for how to draw the Winter Soldier, but it just didn't turn out as well as I had hoped, so I think I'm going to refilm that, and hopefully that will be out soon for you. I have a few videos filmed, but I am just working on editing still, so just very excited to share all of this stuff with you that I have ideas for. I did just get back from vacation for a week, so I kind of got a little bit behind there and I didn't get to film for a week, but I'm excited to be back and filming for you guys, so hopefully you will enjoy all the upcoming videos. Alright, like I said, you can put the alpha lock on your line art layer and you can play around with the colors of that. So I just went ahead and turned that alpha lock on, and now I'm going in just with a dark black color on the eyes and the eyebrows on Loki, and I'm just going to kind of make it a little more realistic by coloring in some of these features with a less harsh tone. So I colored Sylvie's eyebrows in with more of a brown color instead of the dark. And then I'm just kind of playing around with this, like I said. Definitely you have to try it out and just see what it looks like. Some things aren't going to turn out like this right there. I just didn't really like the way that turned out. So I just went ahead and took it back and undid that, and we're going to get back to that later. Alright, now to explain what I'm doing for the shading. I did go ahead and put the alpha lock on every layer of this drawing, and now I've just selected the layer that has Loki's skin on it, the face, and I'm going in with a darker tone of the same shade, or the same color I guess, and I'm just using that technical pencil to mark in where my shadows are going to be, and I'm also adding in some highlights. I usually use a reference for this. I was looking at the image, so make sure you're looking at an image so you can know where to put your shadows. I can't really tell you in a tutorial how to do that because it's different for everything. It depends on where your light source is and how dark the atmosphere, I guess, of the drawing is. So you have to definitely use a reference and keep that in mind when you're doing that. But just play around with this and put the shadows in. I like to use a smaller pencil or pen, I guess, and then start going in. I continue to add darker tones by just using my color tool and bringing it down to select darker tones of the same color, so everything goes together, but the shade just continually gets a little bit darker as I add the shadows. Don't be afraid to add too many shadows. It makes it look more realistic. Sometimes right when you start adding in the really dark tones, it doesn't look right, but after you blend it all in, it's going to look more realistic, and it's definitely going to make your drawing look a lot more finished and really nice. I also forgot to mention that you can just leave the drawing as the flat colors. I know some people do that, and that's kind of the drawing style. So if you don't like the look of super shaded drawings, or you just don't want to shade something, then you can just do line art and fill it in with flat colors. That looks great as well. Alright, now to just blend this in, I'm going to go to the smudge tool, and I'm going to select the acrylic paint, and I'm going to make my brush really small and turn the opacity way down, and then I'm just going to start blending in a cross-hatching and circular motion on this skin tone and blend it all in. This makes it look really natural and realistic, and just kind of makes it look way more seamless and kind of just makes it one tone. So definitely don't overdo this, because then you can just end up with one very blended tone and you won't get to see the gradual definition of color. But just go in, make sure the opacity is way down, and then blend that in, and it's going to look great. Make sure you don't go in all the same direction when you're doing this. It's just going to make it look muddy and messy. Make sure you take the time to go in and shade each individual detail in the direction that it should be going in. I wanted to change up the color here, so I went ahead and did the color balance and just played around with this color. I am still on that skin tone layer, so it's not changing the color of anything else, and I just made sure the color was looking how I wanted it to before I moved on to anything else. Then I went in with a dark skin tone and I just colored in the facial features so that they didn't stand out so much, and it just looked a little more realistic. Again, I was going for a more finished illustration today, so I didn't want my line art to be completely black. So I just went in with that dark skin tone and it really made everything pop, but still look super natural. Alright, now I'm going to go in and color his hair. When I'm drawing black hair, I usually like to use more of blue tones, cool tones. So I did go in with this blue-gray just to add the highlights, and I love the way that this looks. I think it turned out great. I've really been working on getting the black hair color down in digital drawings, and I think that this really turned out great. You can see the shine on it with the highlights, but then I've used a really dark navy blue to add some shadows. I just think it really brings everything out and looks super great. When I'm drawing lighter hair, I definitely try to use strokes of hair just to make it look like it's not just one piece of hair, it's strands of hair making it up. And you can see I kind of did that here as I'm kind of drawing strands of hair in it, just to create highlights and shining on it. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing there, and that's kind of how I draw hair. I decided not to blend in the hair just because I wanted to save those highlights and just make it look very bright and make it pop. So I didn't blend that in, I just left it exactly how it was. And now I'm just moving on to the tie, adding in the shadows and the highlights. This I didn't spend too much time on just because it wasn't extremely important, but I did use the same method of selecting darker tones and lighter tones for the shadows and highlights. Then I just used my tool to blend that in, but making sure I still left the highlight there so you can still see it. You can definitely overblend everything, and even though you want to make it look as natural and realistic as possible, still leaving some of those bright highlights and dark shadows are really going to help make your drawing pop and look really nice. Here I'm just adding a very light skin tone to add some highlights to his face. I think that this really brought that skin tone together and kind of took it up a level of making it look really nice, so I'm glad I did that. Definitely recommend using a very light skin tone just to add some quick little highlights to the skin. And I'm continuing the same process on the brown pants. Still doing the same thing I've been doing this whole time coloring. And just make sure, again, that you have the alpha lock set on these drawings. That prevents you from coloring outside these flat tones, so you can just go ahead and shade and blend away on all these different sections of your drawing without going outside the lines. Procreate has a lot of fun brushes and textures that you can use. I used the kind of plaid pattern just to add a little bit of like stitching to the pants. It's very light, so you can't see it that much, but just a little bit of that just kind of elevates it a little bit. So make sure you're going through your brushes and trying different textures and stuff. All those little things coming together makes a really good finished illustration, and it's really going to bring your drawings up a level and make them look great. I did add some stitching to the tie as well. Again, just another little detail that makes it all come together and look awesome. Drawing white shirts is kind of hard just because you want to add the shading, but you still want to keep it looking crisp and white. So I recommend using gray tones and blue tones and maybe even just a little bit of purple. And make sure you add lots of highlights to white shirts when you draw them. It just makes them look like it's still white, but it does have shadows. So as you can see, I'm using a blue-gray to add in my shadows there, but I'm still preserving some of the white color. Make sure you really study your reference so you can get the folds in the fabric right. I really tried to make this shirt look as realistic as possible, as far as like the folds and the wrinkles in it, and then of course I'm blending it all out but still keeping it looking like the t-shirt, or I guess dress shirt, is folded in the same places. So I definitely didn't blend this as much as I did the skin tone. Alright, now we're going to move on to Sylvie. I forgot to start recording again, so that's why this is already partially finished on her face. But now I'm going in with the blending again. I'm doing the exact same process for her, nothing different. Of course, the hair will be just a little bit different because it's a lighter color, but I still use the same process for this entire drawing, starting from a medium tone, going dark, and then adding highlights after it's blended. I always do this no matter what the drawing. Sometimes I take it a little bit further and spend more time on it, and sometimes I do it quickly, but I always use the same methods, and that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of Sylvie's outfit, hair, and skin. Don't forget to add blush to your characters also. I didn't really add any to Loki, but I did make sure to add some on Sylvie, so make sure you do that. And also make sure you add a little bit of lip color, even if they're not wearing lipstick. Just make sure you add a little bit of color there. And again, I'm playing with the color balance just to get that color exactly how I want it. I added a little more of a yellow and pink tone, and I think it really made it pop and brought the saturation up a little bit. There are the highlights on Sylvie's face. Just make sure you get them right on top of the cheekbone, and I like to do it on the curve of the face and on the nose. So just make sure you add that in. It's just super cute, and I love the way that it looks. I also usually add some on the lip. It just makes it pop a little bit. And I did darken her eyebrows just a little bit, just to kind of go with the skin tone after I changed it, and I really like the way that that looks a lot better. Now I'm going back in like I did with Loki and turning that black purple tone into a brown on the line art, just to blend everything in just a little bit more. Here I'm adding some eyelashes. This is another detail that I myself, usually a lot of people forget to include in their drawings, and it just adds a lot, I think. It's just the small little details that kind of bring us all together. So just don't forget to add eyelashes to your characters. I think it really makes everything look really nice and a lot more put together. Also, don't forget to shade the lips. I know I forget to do that a lot as well, but it definitely is going to make them look a lot more finished. Of course, after you've shaded the entire face, just make sure you shade the lips. Alright, for the hair, when I draw blonde hair, I usually just like to stick with lighter browns, a little bit of yellow, and even just a little tiny bit of a grayish green color. When it's all blended together, it just looks very natural and very blonde. So I'm just drawing hers more in strands because it's more curly and fluffy. Loki's is a little more slicked back, so hers is going to be a lot more carefree, and I'm going to get all the hair texture in there. Now, if you're wondering what brush I'm using, this is one brush that I did download. I don't even know where I got it from, but it's a curly hair brush. I like to use this one. It's a smudge tool, and I like to use it when I blend in the hair. It just kind of makes it look a little more natural, and you can see the wispy kind of texture of all the hair coming together. So I definitely like to use that when I'm drawing curly hair. You can probably find one of these brushes somewhere online and download it to your Procreate. I just don't remember exactly where I got mine from. Did go ahead and add a little bit of a darker tone just to make it look a little bit deeper colored and a little bit more deeply shadowed, and then I go back in with those highlights just to lighten it up again. When you're drawing blonde hair, don't go right in with like a yellow color. Make sure you're still using tan colors and brown colors. It's just going to look more natural and more realistic. Now the hair was just a little bit too dark, but I didn't want to get rid of my shadows, so I just went ahead and played with the hue, saturation, brightness, and color balance just to get it the color I was wanting. Alright, now I'm just going into her outfit and I'm shading everything. I have the highlight coming kind of from the front, and then the back side of her is going to be a little bit darker. I did the same on Loki. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm just going in a kind of line pattern. As you can see, I used lines to shade this time. And I'm just going to shade this like I did Loki's outfit, using my reference to know where the shadows and highlights go. I really can't explain it anymore. Just make sure you're taking your time with this and knowing exactly where all the shadows, highlights need to go. Don't guess on this. Make sure you look at a reference, or at least look up some similar reference of how you want your pose to look and where you want the sun to come from, so that it looks right and it looks more realistic. And again, don't be afraid to use darker colors to do shadows and lighter colors to do highlights. If you look at real life, then a lot of things that are light colored have very dark shadows on them. So make sure that you're adding all those in, just to add more depth to your drawing and make it look much more finished. And again, don't overblend the fabric. It's going to look so much better if you just leave some of those lines in, and make it look a little bit less overblended. And if you lose some of those highlights while you're blending, just go back in and make sure you add them back. You want to keep everything very highlighted and looking really nice. Alright, now that I'm happy with the way that I've colored this, I'm going to duplicate the drawing and put everything onto one layer. So you're just going to combine everything into one, and as you can see that I'm doing that. Alright, now that our characters are all on one layer, I did go ahead and get rid of that background. I just wanted to try something different. I'm going to put one layer underneath of our characters and just use some colors with one of these neon tools that I found on Procreate. It's already pre-downloaded. I'm just going to have fun with the background and just create something very fun, and just to make it pop a little bit, I did go ahead and use some purple and green and blue, and I think the bright colors really look good with this. This is something, again, I can't really explain how to do because it's different for every drawing, but just play around with it and look on Pinterest for some fun background ideas. There's so many things you can do with Procreate. Now I'm just going in with a soft brush set on a light tone, and I'm just kind of highlighting the characters. This is set on alpha lock, so it can't go outside what we've already placed down, but I'm just going to go in and highlight a little bit more with this brush. Alright, now I've put everything into one layer, and I'm going to use the color balance and play around with this just to make everything look more cohesive, and like the color scheme is all the same throughout the drawing. I added a little bit more blue tones, a little more yellow tones, and I just played around with this until all of the elements of the drawing were looking how I wanted them to. I think that this really helps out your drawings and makes them look so much better. I just love the way this looks. And after I use the color balance, I usually go in with the hue, saturation, and brightness and just mess with that a little bit as well. And of course, after that, it's just kind of time for touch-ups. I'm just adding a little bit more highlights here and there and just playing around with what I have. And of course, you can stop at any point when you feel like you're done with your drawing. Alright guys, that's all I have for today. I hope this tutorial was a help to you. I had so much fun creating this. This is one of my favorite drawings that I've done on Procreate. I just love the style that I did it in. I think they turned out great. Hopefully you guys created something along with me. If you did, let me know what you were drawing. Of course, leave your requests down below. I always try to look at those and do what you guys would like me to do in future videos. So again, thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked the finished piece. Let me know what you think, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye!